The Ink and Paint Club podcast is intended for mature audiences. These guys can't go about like 3 seconds without saying a swear, so, listener discretion is advised.
There's snow everywhere, and I don't like it.
I'm in a beach town in Southern California. We've never seen snow.
Hey, Matt. Fuck you.
You're listening to the Ink and Paint Club podcast, your weekly home for animation reviews and discussions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ink and Paint Club podcast for this week. My name is JD, and I'm joined by Matt.
Yo.
And Kyle actually had some legit artwork to do, so we felt that was more important for him to get done. But Aiden is back again to help us out.
Hey, I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm always the replacement.
No,
saving our bacon 2 weeks in a row, just like usual. Because the last time that we had him on, when you were missing, I had him on 2 weeks in a row too.
Damn.
So old Kyle just needs to go missing next week, and then we have Aiden on for 3 weeks in a row, and then we'll be breaking his record.
Yeah, he's got to break the record, man.
Gotta break that streak.
So this week we are talking about probably the oldest piece of animation we've ever talked about on this show. In fact, it's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It is a movie called The Point, a movie I had never heard of. Matt put it on the schedule because apparently he saw it as a child.
Yeah, so I watched this movie before doing it for the podcast. The only and last time that I saw this movie was in the 6th grade. My teacher put it on in, I think, for language arts class, which is just, your standard reading class, whatever. I cannot remember the context with which she put it on. I think maybe because it's kind of like a talky movie, so maybe in that regard or something. But anyway, yeah. The last and only time I saw this movie was when I was like 11 years old in 6th grade. And when I was looking up stuff that was celebrating their anniversaries this year, I saw it pop up, and I'm like, oh my god, I remember that movie. I remember it being really freaking bizarre. And rewatching it for the show, and watching it 2 times, in fact, I can verify that it is just as weird as it was when I was 11 years old.
Bruh, I watched this because you're like, we're gonna do this for the show this week. I'm like, all right, fine, whatever.
Well, listen, I did preface it, and I said, is there anything else you guys want to do? Because otherwise, there's this, and I have some familiarity with it, and you didn't bring up anything else. So I'm like, okay, let's do it.
I was not opposed to doing this because when you said oh, this thing's celebrating its 50th anniversary, and I was really thinking about it, well, we do kind of tend to skew pretty recent with what we talk about on the show. So I would like to talk about some older stuff, in the future. So I'm like, okay, I'll give this a shot. Matt, this is hands down one of the weirdest fucking things I've ever seen. It's not bad weird. It's just weird. It's it is definitely 70s weird.
Yeah, no, it's very very...
much that I'm sure we'll get more into the background of this, but I was just reading the Wikipedia. So apparently this is based off a album by a artist called Harry Nilsson. I don't know who that is.
So Harry Nilsson was pretty prolific in the 70s and 80s. He had done collaborations with other artists. He's worked with some Beatles. He's worked with some Monkees. He's worked with some Led Zeppelins in music and in movies and stuff. His career was between 1966 and 1980. He released 18 albums, a few of those also being soundtracks to films. One called Skidoo, another one called Son of Dracula, which Harry actually was a star in, along with the Ringo Starr. And he also did the soundtrack for the live-action Popeye musical, the one with Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall.
Oh, jeez.
Really?
Yeah, that was Harry Nilsson.
Holy shit.
And that was actually the last thing that he did up until his death in 1994, I believe. He'd retired from doing recordings shortly after that due to some contract disputes, I believe. Or I think it might have actually been a because he had a pretty close relationship with John Lennon, and he died in 1980. So I think he took a break from the recording industry and it kind of turned into just like a semi-retirement. He was working on a comeback album around the early 90s. And unfortunately, he suffered a heart attack. He recovered shortly after, and he was able to record all the vocals for the album, and then died like literally the same day that he recorded the last vocals for it. But that album wouldn't actually see release until 2019.
Jeez.
It was called Lost and Found, I believe. I'm not that familiar with Nilsson's work other than The Point. Like maybe some other things here and there because, like I said, he's worked with other artists and stuff. But just going off of what I've heard here, because like I said, I watched the movie twice, and then I also listened to the album because obviously the album it's all the stuff that's featured in the movie, but it doesn't include the scenes from the movie. They're not like wholesale because the album came out before the movie. The album came out in December of 1970, and then the movie came out in February 1971. So,
well,
yeah,
basically what I was trying to get at is that when I was reading about this, this movie is based on this guy's album. But the idea for this album, he's quoted by saying he was on acid and realized that trees had points.
Yeah, so hang on.
That's how a lot of fucking...
And that's like the most 70s thing I can think of.
I have the whole quote here, and I would like to read it wholesale because it's a very fun quote. And I quote, "I was on acid, and I looked at the trees, and I realized that they all came to points, and the little branches came to points, and the houses came to points. I thought, oh, everything has a point, and if it doesn't, then there's no point to it."
I mean, I have not done acid. I have not done acid, but from what I've heard from people who have done acid, that's what it does to you, basically.
You just make weird patterns in the world.
Yeah, you just see like weird patterns in the world. Like, that's what happens when you take hallucinogenics.
So the other thing about this, though, was I was under the impression that this was just an album that he made, and then ABC decided to do a cartoon movie about it. But apparently, because I went to Harry Nilsson's the website that's kept for his work, and there's a page on there for The Point. And it says that it was actually commissioned to be the soundtrack for this movie. So he did the soundtrack for the movie. So it wasn't just something of his own volition, I believe. So that means that he came up with the idea for this cartoon movie, and then I just think of that quote, and I think like, well, that's what he decided to. That's what they asked him. Hey, do you want to work on the soundtrack to this cartoon movie we're doing? And he's like, sure. And it's like, okay, we'll just come up with it, and then we'll do whatever later. And then you just come across that quote, and you're like, man, I kind of wish it was just that simple nowadays.
I mean, if you look at this movie, it definitely looks and sounds like someone did this while heavily intoxicated.
It's not like anyone can just go into the studio, huff a bunch of air duster, and then come out with the masterpiece.
Oh.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's always the joke that people like to make where it's like, how high were they when they made this? But quite literally, I believe he must have been under the influence of...
he must have been fucking high when he made this.
Yeah, because he was talking about how he was on acid and he came up with the idea for it, so I can only imagine that he was also under the influence of acid while he was kind of coming up with the structure and the story and everything.
It was the 70s. I'm pretty sure that was just widely accepted to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was during a time where apparently, at least from what I've heard from people who were around in the 70s, it was totally okay to... Everybody was kind of under the impression of, after you get out of high school, you're gonna do all the drugs.
I mean, most of Hollywood was on cocaine at the time, so...
Everyone was on cocaine at the time.
They're on some
just
sort of
openly
various...
on cocaine.
Yeah. Everyone was doing something.
But, Matt, so since you are the one who prompted this episode to be, why don't you briefly walk us through the nonsense that is this plot of this movie?
So before I do that, I do just want to briefly detail who was in charge of actually doing the movie proper. because it was actually kind of a little bit surprising to me. The director of this movie is Fred Wolf, who was one of the co-founders of Fred Wolf Films, and him specifically, he has an Academy Award for Best Animated Short in 1967. I forgot to write down the name of the short that he did, but yeah, he has an award for that. But his production company, so by extension him, had a hand in some shows you might have heard of, like The Flintstones, or Alvin and the Chipmunks, or DuckTales, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Pretty good resume.
Yeah.
And also,
live stuff.
Because the whole time that me and Daniel were watching this, we were kind of just thinking like, it's kind of, it's like it's from the 70s, so we're obviously going to liken it to probably the most well-known like bit of animation from the 70s. It kind of we were saying like it kind of looks like Schoolhouse Rock, which I was surprised. One of our friends mentioned Schoolhouse Rock, and honestly, I can see it. I was surprised to find that was not part of his credits, though, but there was something else that when I tell you that they're in charge of, you will instantly think, oh, that's right, it looks exactly like that. The production company was in charge of the very classic, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll Center of a Tootsie Pop?
As soon as I saw this movie, I'm like,
fucking
God. Is this the same people? It looked exactly like that animation.
Yes,
so thank you for confirming that for me.
Yes, so it's the same company. In fact, the voice actor for Oblio in the film is the same voice actor for the kid in those shorts.
That's funny.
Oh my God, I hear it.
Yeah.
I can fucking hear it too.
Which I should definitely mention here, the voice for Oblio is one of the members of the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Is one of the younger Bradys. I can't remember which one, but
he's Bobby Brady.
Bobby Brady, that's what it was. Yeah,
I only know that because I'm looking at Wikipedia. I've never watched the Brady Bunch in my life.
I remember watching a bit of Brady Bunch when I was like growing up. I couldn't tell you anything about it now.
My mother-in-law is like hella obsessed with the Brady Bunch, but that's about.
The other bit of production stuff I definitely want to mention because it's the most unusual thing before talking about the kind of the plot of the movie proper. There's at least 4 versions of this movie, and the movie is basically the same in every regard except in the movie the movie is there's a framing device with a dad telling the story of the point to his son. And so the father, and by extension the narrator for the movie, is done by the same voice actor. Now, when they did the initial airing of this movie, that character was voiced by Dustin Hoffman, who was paid $20,000 for that specific performance, but just for that performance. So they aired it once, and then they never aired it again with his vocal performance. So every other airing after that, they had to have a different recording. So after that came a recording with an actor named Alan Barsman, which I wasn't able to find any sort of example of. There's an example of the Dustin Hoffman recording on YouTube that I was able to find. There's nothing for the Alan Barsman one. That one's still missing, but for a long time, these other ones were missing too, so I'm sure it'll pop up eventually. The third one was with Alan Thicke, who's a pretty prominent...
TV's Alan Thicke.
Alan Thicke, pretty prominent, 1970s, 80s actor, father of Robin Thicke. That was actually the version of the movie that me and Aiden watched first.
That's the one I watched too.
So we watched that one. And then for the home media releases, basically for the VHS and for the DVD, they have Ringo Starr, the drummer for the Beatles, doing the father and the narrator. And I thought that was kind of funny because I made note of earlier that one of the soundtracks that Nilsson did some years later after the point was for the movie Son of Dracula, which him and Ringo Starr were both in.
Huh. Which
is funny because that would have predated like the home media releases where they got Ringo Starr in there to do the narration stuff. But I'm wondering if that was because they knew each other from that. Pretty funny stuff. But yeah, that when I watched it a second time just before recording, I watched the Ringo version just as a comparison's sake because those are the only two. The Ringo one's the one that's widely available because of home media, and then that Alan Thicke one is on YouTube, and it was somebody just found like a VHS copy that they had of that recording, and they paired it up with like the DVD quality recording and stuff. So that's only just recently kind of come out, but it was nice to kind of be able to actually compare two different versions of it. But yeah, because you said you only watched the Alan Thicke version, right?
Yeah, I just watched whatever was on YouTube.
Right. So me and Aiden both watched the movie twice, and so we watched it with the Ringo Starr version and the Alan Thicke version, and I think we both kind of share the same sentiment, right, Aiden? Like
the Alan Thicke I love Ringo Starr, and I'm sure his narration was nice, but whatever reason, the version that I watched, the version of the Ringo Starr recording I watched had this horrible echo to the entire audio track, and I don't know why it had that. So, like, if you're gonna watch this movie, just watch the Alan Thicke cut.
If you're able to find it on YouTube, because otherwise, if you watch it like legitimately, if you find like a DVD recording or something for it, I'm sure it's completely fine. But I was just talking more specifically on like a performance standpoint, because I would say between those two, I actually really preferred Alan Thicke's version to Ringo Starr's, and I think based solely on the regard that I feel like Ringo's works as a narrator, but not as the father character. Yeah,
because no one else in that movie is British.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's just more like a performance thing, because it kind of feels like he's kind of just reading lines, whereas in Alan Thicke's performance, he actually feels like he is performing as the father.
Well, he was a TV dad for a long time, so
yeah, and I just think it's a better pairing.
Sure.
And like I said, there's a little bit of a sample of the original Dustin Hoffman voice track from YouTube, and listening to that, like, I can probably get behind that too, but without seeing like the whole thing, it's hard to make a comparison point. But yeah, so yeah, that's the last bit of the production thing. So now we can actually talk about the not just the craziness of the production, but the craziness of the actual film itself.
Oh, man.
So basically, this movie is about. It's a town full of people who have points on their heads and who also are living in architecture with points, and whose basic economy and everything else in town is pointy. So everyone has a point. And they will make sure to let you know that throughout the movie, is that everything has a point.
Everything has some kind of point.
And it is up to you to determine whether they mean literally or figuratively.
And I feel like they simultaneously mean both and not at all.
Exactly.
That's the thing that really confused me when I first watched this movie, and like, because it is both a metaphor and a literalization of point.
Yes.
And it is insanely confusing.
It's very confusing. I watched this like at like 12:30 at night while I was in bed. So I'm sure that didn't help my understanding of this movie, but like, this movie's just really fucking weird.
I feel like there's a quote from the main character Oblio that I wrote down that I definitely wanted to make note of, that I feel like might summate a lot of people's feelings toward this movie after having seen it. A line that he says is, I really don't understand this.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So, and that's just going off the basic premise of the film. So once you actually get into like the movie proper, so yeah, that's kind of the background. So one day there is a child born who does not have a point on his head. It's just like he's a roundheader named Oblio, and he grows up, and he's probably like in grade school in this movie, but like, yeah, he gets along with like the other kids, and people don't frown upon him being the way that he is. There's just a very specific characters in this movie that seem to antagonize him.
He's the Draco Malfoy of this movie.
Me and Aiden were saying while watching this movie that so basically there's the Count, which is like the main dude. He's the one that actually gets Oblio sort of ostracized from society and forces him out. But then also the Count's child, who kind of instigates it by starting to bully him in the first place. But we were saying that the Count was kind of like, it's kind of like if Waluigi fucked the Grimace from McDonald's.
If Waluigi, the Grimace, and Dr. Robotnik all had some sort of weird amalgamation.
That's what it was. Maybe. I forgot about the Robotnik thing.
Oh my god. That's great. That's good shit right there.
So basically, their hellspawn is the Count, and he consorts with the King, who is just the Ice King from Adventure Time.
More or less.
He looks exactly like him, and I'm wondering if Penn Ward. I imagine Penn Ward must have seen the point at some point in his life.
I'm sure he has.
And that must have been a direct inspiration design-wise. But anyway, yeah, he kind of just works with him to get... And the thing is, it's just the Count and his kid are the only ones that don't like Oblio, and so they're saying
everyone
that,
else loves him and thinks he's great.
Yeah, but they were saying like, oh, but the law is that everyone in town has to have a point, and he doesn't have a point, so we should get rid of him. And like no one agrees, but I mean the law is the law, and they even say in there like good law or bad law, it's still the law, and that type of thing. So yeah, they force him out, and then the rest of the movie is basically Oblio kind of just exploring outside of this town, because I think they kind of say that everyone in town just sort of stays in town, they don't leave, so they don't really know what's out there, and they kind of force him to they're saying that he needs to go to the Pointless Forest, and so from then on the rest of the movie is just sort of Oblio meeting this colorful cast of characters. One that he keeps on meeting is the Pointless Man. The Pointed Man, sorry.
The Pointed Man.
The Pointed Man, who's like this, it's like...
Motherfucker looks like he belongs in Yellow Submarine.
Yeah, he's kind of got like a Blue Meanie feel to him.
Yeah, but he's got 3 faces.
He's got 3 faces, and they're all like different voice actors. One of them is June Foray, that I can remember. But yeah,
it's a cartoon of the 70s. You gotta have June Foray in there somewhere.
Yeah, because I think they have another Rocky and Bullwinkle actor in here too. I think the dad is actually voiced by whoever voiced Boris. I think.
Oh, Paul
if I remember that right. Paul Frees. Yeah, I think that's right. But yeah,
you're right.
Okay, so yeah, the Oblio just goes around and meets these characters. There's a big rock man who's like this very mellow character.
He's a beatnik jazz player.
Made out of
I
rocks.
love the Rockman's character, but his design legitimately kind of creeps me out.
Dude, I'm not bothered by so much. I'm bothered by the fact that they gave him segmented teeth.
That's what really bugs me about it, is the segmented teeth.
He has individual teeth, and it's disturbing.
So weird.
There's that character. He goes on to meet who was it after that? It was
the dancing ladies, I think.
No, it was the Tree Man, wasn't it?
No, the Tree Man's
the
third.
Tree Man was a little later.
Was it? Okay. So yeah, he meets the Rock Man. After that, he meets the 3 like balloon-esque fat dancing ladies who we kept on referring to when we were watching as somebody's sexual awakening.
I mean, it had to be.
Yeah.
Let's just be real. From the way the scene plays out, this was someone's sexual awakening.
Wow.
So there's that, and then after that, he meets...
We don't kink shame here, by the way.
No.
We're just saying it like it is.
We're just spitting facts. I mean, it's not more likely than not that it was somebody like watches this kid and is like, I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. So after that, there's the Tree Man, who's kind of like an uptight like business person.
He's in the business of selling leaves.
Yeah,
like you do.
There's that character, and then I think
there's the bird.
Yeah, then there's the bird, who's like the big egg on a mountain. There's like little bits, it's not. I mean, I don't know.
It's just some weird shit, like interstitial shit that has no bearings on what's going on.
Yeah, so we did mention that, of course, there's a soundtrack to this film, and it's not a musical per se, but it is punctuated by these specific tracks being in the movie. I believe like the song "Me and My Arrow" was the one that kind of got some radio play from this. That one did like pretty well on the charts back in the day. Which I looked
up because like initially the idea of "Me and My Arrow," like when we were watching it first, it was like, oh, this could be about like maybe this is a reinterpretation of a song that's actually about like an arrow, like an archer. And then I looked up the lyrics. No, it's very literal. Like it is actually about a dog named Arrow. Like, the movie is more or less a visual album, a visualized version of the full album.
Yeah, and so that was what I was mentioning earlier, was that I actually did listen to just the album in between viewings of the film, the 2 times that I watched it. And yeah, those bits where the actual movie would be happening between the songs, they're just like these like 1 minute, 1 minute and a half tracks of Harry Nilsson doing narration, kind of talking about what would be happening in this point in the story. It's kind of like, narrating his own thing.
Does that mean this movie technically has like 5 narrators?
Well, I mean, that's just specifically for the album version, so I don't know. I wouldn't personally count it. Although it does make me wonder why they didn't just have him do that character for the movie. I guess maybe they wanted some bit of star power behind it for... Although that was the other thing, too, actually, I found out. I think this was the very first animated special to ever air on ABC.
Well, I think it was the first animated feature to air on television.
Oh, that's what it was.
Like in primetime television.
That's what it was.
Huh.
Which is a neat little factoid.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 71, so that makes sense. That checks out.
That was kind of cool. This is the first, like, feature-length animated movie to be shown on television. So, I mean, that's kind of cool.
See, this movie is very historic despite being very insane.
Yeah.
Very fucking weird.
So anyway, yeah, Oblio meets these characters and kind of starts learning about the world around them, because obviously growing up where he grew up, it's a very sheltered sort of way of thinking where it's just all based around points. So coming across all these characters with all their different sort of ideologies and stuff, comes to learn that everyone has a point, and if there's, no.
It's also worth pointing out that, like, interspersed between various, like the plot, there's also just a whole bunch of just random music video segments.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And some of those just get fucking strange. Like, there's one, I don't remember what the song is called. I just remember that's the one where it has the weird bird Mickey Mouse fusion hybrid
the Donald
thing.
Duck Mickey fusion.
Yeah.
The Donald Mickey fusion dance.
There's
and just
also a very, very outdated portrayal of a...
oh god, that's what's in that one too.
Yeah, that's the same.
Racist portrayal of a Chinese person.
Yeah.
That's the one part of the movie that hasn't aged particularly well, but it only lasts for about like 6 seconds, I believe.
Yeah.
At least it isn't Peter Pan.
Yeah.
With the central plot focus.
Oh my god. I think that might have been...
Disney is problematic sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, you'll get these little bits with like the songs in there where they're just sort of animating segments to it, like the one song that I remembered after all these years was solely because, well, okay, so the name of the song is Think About Your Troubles. And I remembered that song only because one of my favorite bands, Jellyfish, who I think I've talked about on the show before in relation to Andy Sturmer, who's done a bunch of title themes to a bunch of cartoons. That was his band before. But they did a cover for a Harry Nilsson tribute album, and so they did a cover of that song. And I always really enjoyed that song, and I found out later that it was a cover of this song for this movie that I had watched when I was 11. And so doing like all the connections in my head, I'm just like, I was so like blown away. Like
that's weird.
The stuff gonna work out that way. But yeah. So anyway, Oblio. It's funny because he's ostracized from society, and then he just sort of decides to not
comes back.
It kind of reminded me of a bit from of course it wouldn't be a fucking episode of the Ink and Paint Club podcast if I didn't bring up Invader Zim at some point.
Right.
There's an episode where they talk about, the very first episode, they're talking about how Zim was banned to Foodcordia, and he was like, you stopped being banished? Yeah. It's basically that. He goes back to town, and everyone's just like celebrating his re-arrival.
Even though, I don't know how long he's been gone. It seems like it's been less than a day, honestly.
Yeah. Well, no, it's at least
been out there for like an afternoon.
It's at least been a day because it was nighttime when he went to sleep and he woke up. So
he might have been. Yeah, he's been gone for maybe a couple,
day.
maybe
a
18
day.
hours at the most.
Yeah. he goes back to town. He's met with everyone, and he sort of demonstrates like what he's learned, talking about how everyone has a point, even if they don't have one. The Count saying like, well, if you had a point, then you would have one. Rips off. Oh, that was something we forgot to mention too. Is that because he has the round, he does not have a point for a head, so he wears a pointed hat to sort of fit in. The Count rips off that hat and finds that he has grown a point.
Which I honestly felt was the most like hackneyed way to end that movie. Like it's such a cop. I felt it was such a cop-out ending.
It would have been a cop-out if everything else didn't lose their point afterward, I don't think. Because now Oblio's the only one with a point in all of the town. Because, the Count,
now they can
his
ostracise
son,
him for having a point.
Yeah.
I thought like at the end of the film, like everybody, including Oblio, loses their point.
No.
That's another...
no, Oblio keeps his point. He just puts the hat on over it.
Fucking conehead looking ass.
Yeah. They really do have big conehead energy for sure.
God. Like the ending is like genuinely one of the most, again, because the way the movie handles its message is both very literal and very metaphorical, it really kind of it's insanely confusing.
Oh yeah.
Because the whole point of the point is so that is to find the point within lives in the pointless forest, but then Oblio, who doesn't have a point, comes back and finds out that everybody has a point, but they don't have points, but then he has a point, and then nobody else has points.
My brain hurts.
I just said 10 points in that one sentence.
And they all meant different things.
I fucking hate the English language sometimes.
I would love to hear a cut of this episode that's just every time we've said the word point.
Every time we say the word point, the episode gets faster.
I edit this podcast. I ain't doing that.
Shit. But yeah, so the movie just sort of ends with, like I said, there's the framing device that gets brought up here, and then with the father telling the story to his son, and it just sort of ends on that. He gets done telling the story, shares a little moment with the son, and then the movie ends.
Yeah.
What I really enjoy about this movie is actually, because I mean the movie is just really, aside from the music, is just very dialogue heavy, but I really enjoy that about it because I feel like the dialogue seems very natural, like especially like in the scene where they're like in the courtroom where the Count's trying to get him ostracized from society. There's a lot of like banter between people in the audience and stuff, just sort of talking amongst themselves, and it just all seems very natural. I don't really. It's very nice. I don't know. I just really like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's two specific characters that I really kind of caught that with. There's these two guys that like they meet up, they run into each other on the street during the beginning of the movie, and then you see them again during the court scene. And yeah, just the way they talk to is just very natural. They kind of like stutter a little bit while they're talking, and they're just like, "Oh yeah,"
they get names wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a very weird, interesting way of having characters give dialogue, and it just felt like very improvised, but like not at the same time. I don't know.
The acting was incredibly natural, and I really like that.
And that's the other thing about this film, too, is that despite how insane we've made it sound here, it's actually a very mellow movie. Like, it is very easygoing, sort of like you can just have this on like in the background, and it's just very...
There's even a character of the rock band who is basically just telling Oblio to chill out and like, be cool, let it go, man. It's cool. It's whatever.
And that was part of the reason why I didn't even mind like rewatching this a second time, just because I kind of, like I said, the first time we watched it among friends, so we kind of talked over some bits, so I kind of wanted to watch it again just by myself to kind of gather a bit more of it, which I don't think I did, but it was just, I was totally fine with rewatching it again, just because, aside from the dialogue being something that I enjoyed, I also really enjoyed the soundtrack to the movie as well. So even though the story might be, a bit nonsensical, I do feel like it's Here's
the thing, I think the plot and story of the movie is actually very straightforward for the most part. It's just a child gets ostracized from society because he doesn't fit in with that society from like the one person
Yeah.
who wants him ostracized, and then he goes on a quest of self-discovery.
Yeah.
Like, really, the plot of the film is very simple. It's just the way that it's structured, the way that it is, what's the word I'm looking for? The way that it is presented and the way that it is sort of, like, shown in the film. It's just so strange because so much of it is a lot of dialogue from characters just sort of talking about the intricacies of life and the meaning of life. And in that regard, it's really fascinating. But also, eventually, I'm just, like, so lost at this point that I just kind of tune it all out.
Anytime any Oblio was having a conversation with anybody, I have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
I'm too smooth-brained for this fucking movie.
Right? No, I'm with you there, man.
You need to be point-brained.
I need to
like,
be pointy-brained.
Like, I started to, like, kind of understand what he's talking about with the Rock Man, because it's just, like, you know, it's just, like, hippie... like, just chill out kind of advice. But then he gets to the Tree Man. The Tree Man is, like, trying to explain business strategies to him. And flipping out about that. I don't know anything that happens with the Pointed Man. I could not tell you what happened. Like, I don't know what that character was going on about at all.
The Pointed Man was very sort of nonsensical, yeah. And in fact, there was something that me and Aiden talked about before we recorded was, it does feel like a lot of this movie is Oblio just sort of coming across these characters and then the Pointed Man showing up and it's just sort of like Oblio kind of talking about what he learned. I feel like if the Pointed Man would have showed up before it happened and kind of talked about these other characters in the forest, it would seem like it would give him a bit more... direction, which would have seemed like the movie might not have been meandering as much.
Well, so as confusing as the Pointed Man was as a character, I did kind of get that they kind of acted as like a secondary antagonist, because I felt that like every time Oblio would go to the Pointed Man, like, oh, hey, I met this person, I learned this thing. I always felt like the Pointed Man was trying to like contradict that person.
Yeah.
Like trying to steer Oblio back to where he started, ideologically, and to the point where towards the end, the Pointed Man just gets fed up and it's like, I can't help you anymore, and just poofs, and just like poofs away again.
Right, and that's just supposed to be sort of the whole thing being like, he is the Pointed Man, yet it seems that his entire existence is pointless because he kind of wants to guide Oblio towards not wanting to find deeper meaning in anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's trying to keep him dumb, but...
Yeah.
But any kind of their discussions or whatever, I have no idea what was going on. It was just like the back and forth of it, and just like the weird double speak that it does. It's so weird. Yeah,
like I had mentioned, even after watching it like 2 times, I don't know that I necessarily understood it any better than I did the first time that I watched it. Not the very first time I watched it. Although maybe the very first time I watched it too. I don't recall really understanding it that much back then either. But yeah, I would say, even though it's hard to make sense of sometimes, it's still I'd still say it's a pretty fun watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say I hated watching it. I'm just left confused and with a lot of questions. Like I'm glad I watched this piece of like animation history, especially something I'd never heard of before. I'm just like left very confused.
It is a strange but unique piece of animation history. I don't know if I'd ever watch it again. I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I'd ever really willingly sit down and watch it again.
This would definitely be a movie that if I ever got like heavy into recreational drugs, I would definitely like, oh shit, put that on.
Right.
I definitely feel like if I started doing more weed, I'd probably have more enjoyment with this film. But also, I don't know, it's an alright film on its own.
So that's a recommendation from me and from everyone else.
I'm very much in the camp, like, if you have not seen this movie, go watch this movie, because it is a kind of like, you need to see this to believe this kind of thing.
Go into it knowing that you will most likely not understand it, but just enjoy the ride.
Just go in knowing that everyone making this movie was high on drugs, and that will explain some things, not everything.
I think the best way I could summarize it, treat this movie like you'd treat watching Yellow Submarine for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go into it expecting like some kind of grand story. Go into it with the mindset of you're going to see some wild shit for like an hour and a half, and it's going to be weird, and you're not going to understand any of it, but the music's going to be really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should definitely talk about Yellow Submarine at some point on here, too.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I have seen that one at least. So,
in the interest of wanting to, if we're gonna cover, if anyone out there listening, if there's any like obviously we've been sticking mostly to like sort of more modern stuff on this show, but if there's any like sort of really retro stuff that you'd want to hear us talk about, hit us up.
Honestly, I'm looking for stuff that's like pre-90s. Like, so if you got 80s, 70s stuff that's just weird shit, we should check out.
I can probably dig around my archive and find some wild stuff from the 70s.
Should we watch Fritz the Cat?
Wow, we should watch more Broth Boxy stuff. I'm definitely in support of that. We should watch Wizards. Oh,
I've never
Wizards!
seen Wizards.
Y'all need to watch Wizards.
Wizards
Holy
is a
shit.
trip. We're gonna fucking cover Wizards sometime on this show.
Dude,
have you guys covered Rock and Rule?
No.
No.
Y'all need to cover Rock and Rule. That movie's great.
I think Matt has Heavy Metal on the schedule sometime this year.
So we might be doing Heavy Metal this year. Keep a lookout for that. But we might do some more Ralph Bosch. maybe I'll pick Wizards for my birthday episode. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, is there anything else you guys want to mention before you start wrapping up here?
No, I think we've made our point.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening and joining us on this journey of a film. Like I said, seek this movie out, whether you watch the version that's on YouTube with Alan Thicke or the home video release with Ringo Starr.
There is a Blu-ray release that came out last year, so it is on Blu-ray.
Yeah, so definitely check this movie out just so you can see this for yourself, because it is definitely as much as this movie is confusing verbally, it is almost equally confusing visually. So definitely seek this out if you haven't already seen it. But if you have seen it or are listening to this after you've watched it, let us know what you thought about it and what you think the point of this movie was. But I think that does it for us here. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there, and we'll catch y'all again next week.
See you then.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the show. You can also jump in our Discord to keep up with the conversation. The Ink and Paint Club podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. Links, as always, are in the description. We'll see you next time.